Hello, everybody. Welcome tonight to Conversations presented by the Canadian Centre for Journalism. This live event is sponsored by Canada's National Observer. I'm Linda Solomon Wood. I'm editor-in-chief of Canada's National Observer, and I'll be your host for the hour ahead, where I hope you'll learn and be inspired. Joining me tonight is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Hydro-Quebec, Sophie Brochu. We're going to talk about energy, power, Quebec and Canada, and also the United States. My last question will be about pipelines, so wait for that. Sophie, welcome.
Hi, Linda. It's great to get to know you. And I would say, because I am here in Quebec, good evening, everyone.
Yeah, good evening to everybody across Canada, and good afternoon if you're in Vancouver. So, Sophie, let's dive right in. Most of us take flipping on a light switch for granted, and many of us don't even realize where our power comes from. But you know all about it. So tell us, where is Quebec taking the lead in power and also in the race against climate change? And what role does Hydro-Quebec play?
Well, it's a very vast question. Thank you for it. I have a little discomfort in the expression of where Quebec leads, because a leader means we are in advance of everybody else, which I feel uncomfortable with, because every territory starts with the existing position and with the cards that were given to the citizens of that place, right? And we have the responsibility, whatever is the compound, to make it better. So we don't have the same starting point. It so happens that Quebec was blessed with lots, and thousands of rivers and thousands of lakes, very large lakes. So it was a geological reality. It's not because we're more intelligent. Our intelligence in the precedent generations was to harness those rivers and this hydraulic power and capacity, and to make it into a very competitive electric capacity. It was not meant initially to be done because of environmental issues. Environment was not on the screen at the time. The myth of Hydro-Quebec at the beginning, and I come back to it today because I believe we're going back to it. The myth is that the Quebec society was not, the people were not happy of the society they were living in. At the time, the electricity rates were installed by private companies, and the tariffs were dispersed across Quebec, which made it very difficult for regions to attract workers and attract families and attract industries, because the electricity rates were too high. And it was at a time where Quebec wanted to have more power over its economical destiny. So this is where they bought all those private companies and eventually developed the hydro power. So we take our power mostly from 99% is renewable. It comes from hydroelectricity in very, very large part, and in a growing fashion also with private producers of wind here established in Quebec. So I always say that we have 99% renewable product. The challenge of Quebec into its transition is not to green its electricity production. This is not our starting point. We have to green and to make a more sustainable of everything else, but not the electricity production. If you go to Alberta or you go to Nova Scotia, it's a big pocket of betterness if they can green their electricity production. So it's not that a province is better than the other one. The geology is just different. Alberta is blessed with gas and oil. And I've always said, and I still say, had Quebec been blessed with oil and gas, and had Alberta been blessed with thousands of rivers and lakes, we would have the same speeches, but reversed. So we got to be humble, right? We got to be humble. We must not be demagogic about it, but we all have our starting point, and whatever that is, we need to better it. So in Quebec, it's like if you ask a very thin person to lose weight still, but that's the reality, and we have to. And it's not because we are 99% clean power, that we have a passport of diplomacy, climate diplomacy around the world. What we have to do is to deploy everything we can to electrify parts of the economy that are the most impactful in Quebec using fossil fuels. So we all have our starting points.
That's so interesting. And it brings me to another question that I had for you, which is, speaking of Alberta and Quebec and what you're blessed with as opposed to what Alberta has. And how do you see the economy changing? And do you see these, the fact that Quebec has all this access to water, to hydro, the ability to create renewable energy, is Quebec now poised to be economically pushed far ahead as oil and gas is on what may be a sunset?
Well, I think there is definitely a transition that some of our economies have to make, and Alberta is a good example. I don't believe that Albertans should be left alone into this transition, and I don't think we should impose to Albertans, drastic modification of what they are doing. And I think we all need to work on some aspect and share some innovations that we make, and they are great Albertan environmental innovations. People in Alberta do really good environmental innovations, but they also do their economy is so single based that it's a big challenge. So I think that as Canadians, I am a big nationalist, but I am a Canadian. Okay, I say that it's not to make a politics, but it's just to say I do believe that if Canada wants to say we're back in the game, and we are moving ahead into transforming and working the world with this energy transition, we cannot say we have all the tools, they don't have it, they figure that out, make it happen. We can't do that. So we got to be open, and we got to start from each of our starting points. Hydrogen is a good point. In Quebec, we will be able to produce green hydrogen. Great. In Alberta, they'll be able to produce blue hydrogen or gray hydrogen. It's better than strictly fossil, right? So should we say it's got to be green hydrogen? I don't think so. I just say we need to better the starting points we're starting with. And so will Quebec benefit from what has become a very precious resource, renewable, green, abundant? The answer is yes, we will profit from that. And but I'm sure that Albertans are bright. They can innovate. There is a river to cross here, but they should not cross it by themselves. We all should be helping Albertans into their own dreams and developing what they want to be developing, whatever that is.
Sophie, that's really interesting, and thank you for that answer. What I was also asking about was how you see the economic opportunity of clean energy. Like, do you think that clean energy can represent the kind of opportunity for Canada that oil and gas has? If we look at it as, our energy resources, how do they compare?
Sure, I am convinced of that. The issue, Linda, in my mind is not that. The issue is that the clean energy in some part of our country will be developing over a period of time that will impact today's generation. You cannot tell somebody who is 50 years old, who works on an oil rig in Alberta, come build solar roof in Quebec. You can't. So what do you tell this guy? Why do you tell his family? This is how they put bread on their table. This is how they feed the dream. They feed their family, and they bring them to school. So the issue is not can Canada develop a path to clean energy? Absolutely. The issue for me is not that. The issue is how do we take care of the human beings, of the warm bodies of this existing generation and probably the next. So those who are between 30 and 60 right now, what do we do with them? What do we do for them as Canadians? So, and that's where it hurts. it hurts. And I had this conversation with Barack Obama when he came to Montreal, and I interviewed him, and I said, we all agree, but what do you say to somebody who works on a rig in Texas, and I'm all for that clean energy? What do you say? And he said, Sophie, and this is the issue, and this is where it hurts. It hurts, and it takes money. And yes, you can retool somebody, but not everybody. And it's not because, again, you can take somebody who works on an oil rig in Calgary and say you're going to put a solar roof in Quebec. It's too easy. Right. So it's at the end of the day, it's a human being thing. And we got to find the solutions.
You spent today looking into the future. Can you tell us about the meeting you were in, and can you tell us about the kinds of things that you guys were talking about and seeing when you looked into the future?
Yeah, well, it's first we got to be humble. We were chatting just before, and then I kid a lot, but as we grow old, we lose many things, but we gain some others, and among them is humility. And I think we got to be humble. We got to dream big. So as we dream big collectively, and we say we have to make this energy transition, and we will succeed. And we got to pin our flag on the moon and go for it. We also need to accept the fact that we just don't know everything. So we got to be planning, let's say, for 2030, 2040, 2050, completely different scenarios, economically, socially, politically, environmentally. We cannot have a tunnel vision. It's not because we plant our flag on the moon that we say this is exactly how it's going to happen. There will be rupture technologies that will jumpstart things. There will be setback, and there will be social disarray. And as we move collectively to this huge collective responsibility of reducing the emissions of GHG, we also have this responsibility to make it at the least cost possible. And there is this expression, which I use a lot, is that we have people who fear the end of the world, and we have people who fear the end of the month. And to me, the two fears are equal. They are as legitimate. And if we don't take care of the people who fear the end of the month, and we pile up cost, at one point, it will break out. The yellow jackets in France before pandemic was exactly that. So we got to have this compound. So as we look
So you're
forward,
talking about the people who fear not being able to pay their bills at the end of the month.
Exact. And so the responsibility of moving forward and say, okay, we're going to have those subsidies. Subsidies come from somewhere. I mean, it comes from the pocket of the citizens and the taxpayers. At the end of the day, all this transition is going to cost a lot of money. We need to say that. We need to say those words and to say, but we're going to do it in a very thoughtful way. We're going to think it through to smooth it as possible. So we need to get there by 2030, 2040, 2050. But we got to take care of the cost, because the day the people will unplug of the dream because the dream has become too expensive, we will lose everything. And we cannot lose climate. Okay. And my personal belief is that what we're going through right now with the pandemic is what we say in French, a modèle réduit. It's like a pilot of what we could be going through if we were to go through a climate crisis, and there won't be any vaccine. When the tip goes over, there will be no vaccine. So we have the responsibility to succeed, and it's not demagogy, and it's working. And in this path, I personally believe that trying to do the best will deter us from doing better.
So, what you just described about, the climate catastrophe we could face, do you feel like that's what people are facing in a small way right now in Texas?
Well, I think we cannot,
on a smaller scale, not in a small way.
Yeah, and we cannot isolate one special event. Something's sure. The planet has gone berserk. for all the reason. This event in Texas is not an anecdote. It's an example of the tough things that we're going to face. And you look at the insurance, and you look at the fires, and you look at, so we do have a problem. We need to act. But again, the acting implies a cost. And I am an economist, and I am very aspirational, environmentally wise. But I think we underplay the cost that will be associated. There will be great gains. There will be, we will be creating a new economy. We will be innovative. We will export, and there will be benefits on the overall schemes of things. But for the individual people, the households, the consumers, there will be a cost. So, and the point is, who is going to pay for that? And I think that the business model of our countries needs to encompass that we're it's like if you had a business, you were making so much money before, you will make less money, and it will cost you more. And you know what? It's not the end of the world. If you lose everything, it's the end of the world. But let's say you were making 12% rate of return on your investment, and tomorrow you make 11.
That's the trade-off.
I go, so what? If you make 4, you have a problem. But if you go
Right.
11, but if your business model is the multiple of your EBITDA, and you need to keep growing, and then we have a problem. So it's just, I think we have a collective reset to make on what we will have to deploy to succeed. And yes, people will say it will be way less costly than if we do nothing. That's fine. But the cost of doing nothing will be in 30 years. And the cost of doing something is now. So it's all about generation. And the issue that we have in the fundamentally, you know what it is? We are mortal.
We only have so much time.
So yeah, and if we were immortal, every decision we make today would be very different than the one we're making.
How so?
But, well, let's say that we were immortal. I will switch, and let's say that the only way to die would be to be killed by someone. Would we put more money into prevention or into the prisons? Right now, we put more money into the prisons. But the thing would be to put more money into the prevention, because you don't want to be shot, right? So the environment is exactly the same thing. If we knew that we were immortal, would we today say we're going to, and that we have this planet, right? We were immortal, but the planet could be mortal. So how would we go about producing oil? How would we go about producing natural gas? Would we have diesel cars today? Probably. Would we tax them way more? For sure. And so because it would have an impact on our life. Mm-hmm. So the whole idea, and this is where we need, when we say that the fundamental of sustainable development is to leave to the next generation a place that will be no worse off than what we receive. It's exactly that. It's because we are mortal. And so the decisions we make are on an horizon of 60 years, 70 years. Yeah. So the whole thing is about shifting money from one generation to the other.
Thank you. And let's, that brings me to another question I have for you, which is just about the United States and Biden's new climate plan and how it's going to impact Hydro-Quebec. In a recent poll by Clean Energy Canada and Abascus data, 2 out of 3 Canadians said they believe that President Biden will follow through on his promise to make climate change a major priority, while 3 out of 4 want Canada to move our economy at a similar pace towards clean energy so we don't become uncompetitive with the US economy. What would we have to do to move at a similar pace?
Well, I cannot say I'm an expert of the exact pace of Mr. Biden. I think at the heart of it is about innovation. How will we make our business models evolved, and how will we make our economy evolved? The transition, if you take, for example, people say, what does the election of Mr. Biden, President Biden, means for Hydro-Quebec? It mostly means for the states that had a will and their eyes on sight on the horizon when it was another administration. When Massachusetts said, I'm going to go green, when New York said, I am going to go green, they were by themselves, right? Now they have somebody in the White House who shared the dream, and that will, I believe, support how they will go about that. To me, it's, and again, I don't mean to be a contrarian here, Linda, and I know that we need to be competitive with the United States. It's just, we have things that they don't. And Canada has a lot of clean energy that is a solution for the United States of America. And in Quebec, we've been selling energy to the US Northeast for decades now, hundreds of years in New York, actually. So, but we will have to change a little bit the way we do that, because United States will want to develop its own renewable, and they are doing so. And we should be exactly doing the same. So one of the driver of me going at Hydro-Quebec at that period of time of my life, when I was just starting a sabbatical to study in Paris, was about the fact that, okay, it's pandemic, money is going to be scarce. Money, well, actually, there is a lot of money on the planet, but the governments are so invested in the economy that we will need to put our $1 where it really has a value. And yesterday, and Canada is developed like that, we are in courte pointe, a patchwork. We are our energy networks, our energy philosophy are a patchwork. In Vancouver, in Alberta, in Ontario, we all have our little things, and we were very much exchanging north-south, oil, gas, power. All of a sudden, the United States has a lot of oil. They push back the oil, and we go, oh shit, we need to move it east, west. But we have not talked to one another about that for decades. And all of a sudden, we're trying to do something in 3 months we haven't done for 30 years. It doesn't work. So my belief is that today we cannot say, I am going to build my transmission line and your transmission line and his transmission line, just to, can we put our things together? We have a sandbox, and you cannot have your tanka, my tanka, his tanka. We got to share, right? And that's one of the challenge and one of the opportunities I do believe into this future.
Sophie, I'm wondering what have been the biggest challenges, the controversies you faced at Hydro-Quebec? I'm seeing in our chat people throwing a lot of questions out about, we can't get to all those questions, but people want to know about your position on fracking, about some of the controversies you faced. Can you just speak to that?
Well, I did not face that much controversy. I've been at Hydro for a year now, and before that, I led Énergie for 12 years before that, where I ran a natural gas distributor who developed itself into lots of renewables. I would say that today, and that will be interesting if you want to talk about sociology. Today, we are working with this big project. Hydro-Quebec signed an important contract with Massachusetts, large contract. And with Maine, it's a 10 terawatt hour a year project. It's one of the largest greening economy project in North America right now. It's the equivalent of taking out 700,000 cars from the streets every year for 20 years. So it's important. It's very logical. And we have faced some opposition. And I have a lot of time for citizens who say, what about this transmission line? What does it mean for me and the forest and all that? And I will sit down at the kitchen table, my life exchanging with them, trying to influence how we do things and all that. But the people that are actually creating the opposition to the project, for which we have the presidential permit and we have started to work, but still people are at it, are the fossil fuels companies in the US. And it's been out there, and they don't like it. They produce electricity with fossil fuels, and they don't like electricity, renewable, green, abundant, being able to compete at the same price as they do. And they oppose it, and they oppose it vehemently. So some people say our pension funds should stop investing into this and that industries. I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think it's a good idea because those industries, there is no bad industries. They are bad management. What we need is the money to flow to the management of people who run, like I did, a natural gas distributor who say, okay, how am I going to develop renewable natural gas? And then it takes money, and then it takes long-term and patient capital, and then it bring the capital to it. So the biggest opposition I face are people who hide behind citizens, who greenwash and say big hydro is not clean, and we are against Hydro-Quebec coming in, while they are producing electricity from fossil fuels in the market. This, to me, was a big awakening. And then you say those people don't understand they have a business model that has a destiny of an iceberg drifting to the South Seas. And they don't like it, and they don't see it, and they fight. So my point is that even though the project is green, competitive, reliable, there will always be people who will be fighting against us. And will that be protective measure? Would that be business model protection? But again, am I mad at the people who work in the plant? And I say, absolutely not. Actually, we would hire those 20 people who work in the plant, right? That this is what we have to do. We have to provide work from the people who could theoretically lose their payday. Actually, nobody will lose their payday because they will keep producing on the marginal. So it's just a weird way of looking about what you call controversies.
Thank you. For those of you just tuning in, I'm Linda Solomon Wood, and I'm here with the CEO of Hydro-Quebec, Sophie Brochu. This Conversations event has been sponsored by Canada's National Observer. We still have half an hour. There's a lot of ground to cover. It's produced by the Canadian Centre for Journalism. If you'd like to help us bring more of this thought-provoking series to the public, please consider making a donation. There's a link in the chat. Now, on to our next question. Sophie, as you just told us, you're a veteran of the energy industry, and as of 2020, the first woman to lead Hydro-Quebec as CEO and president. What got you onto this path more than 3 decades ago?
Accident. I was not meant to be working in the business world. I did drama school. I did the Conservatoire de Musique and the Conservatoire d'Art Dramatique. And at the end of it, I realized I like, and I still like, being surrounded by artists. I like the creativity. I am not, but I discovered I was not. And then I said, okay, I'm going to go to university, to something that is larger. So sociology, politics, economics. I chose economics. I hated it. I hated school all the way in my life, actually. And at the very last course of my undergraduate study, I met a teacher, a Syrian guy, and who came from Paris, through Paris school. And he just sat in the front of the school. And at the time, we were smoking in the universities. And he would smoke and talk about energy and OPEC and the household budgets and the strategy of industrial war, all attached to energy and who controls energy and why would you go to the Persian Gulf, make a war, for God's sake? And then I said, wow, this is fun. This is complex, and I think I could like it. So I started like that, and I made my career. Actually, I had 2 employers in my life. I am a very traditional, boring girl who had two employers.
So energy.
It just came. It came like that. I fell into it, and I just loved it. I joined a crown corporation who had the responsibility at the time in Quebec to deploy the natural gas system, and I got into the holding, and then back at the operating level. I worked there for 22 years. I led the company for 12. I elected to start a sabbatical, which I meant to be 2 years long. I was meant to study and teach, and 3 months after came pandemic, and I saw all the economy going around, and I said, how can I help my part of the world? How can I help Quebec? I don't have much talent. I know energy. And the guy who led Hydro-Quebec at the time elected to go to Bombardier. They called me, and and it's just great. It's just fantastic show.
In the years that you've been doing this, in this 21-year period, climate change has kind of gone from like a way in the background issue for much of the public to, right up front. So how has that affected you in your role?
Oh, absolutely, completely. And I have to say that at the end of the 90s, 99, the company with the natural gas distributor in Quebec was the first company to implement efficiency programs to help our customer consume less of what we were selling them. And my peers all across the country would go, what are you doing? Are you crazy? And I will tell you the story because it tells a lot about, if you give me 2 minutes, I'll tell you the story because it tells about, to me, the story of Canadian energy. At the end of the 90s, at the end of the 80s, there were many producers out west, big, small, oil and gas. But every shop out west knew the people in Ontario, the plant operator by their first name. Then came NYMEX, then came the financial market. And the people out west all have to do to sell their stock was to sell it on the NYMEX and on the future. They got rid of the salesmen. They were men at the time. And this is where it caught. We didn't have a conversation for 30 years, And at one point, we don't remember that, but at one point in 2010, the price of natural gas went through the roof from 3 to 5 to 8 to $13 a gigajoule. And at the time, I ran the customer service. And the people were calling the company and they were crying because they were saying, how am I going to pay my natural gas bill? It's gone through the roof. Do I feed my children or do I heat my home? And at the time, nobody in the producing world called me to say, can we help? Is there any way for us to help? So my own way with the company to say we're going to help the company, we don't produce the stuff, we can influence the price. The only thing we can do is to help them consume less so that their bill is lower. And so we're going to help them. And this is how we started with the efficiency program. And at the time, Hydro-Quebec followed us. And then eventually, and still today, Hydro-Quebec's one of our main chantier is to help the people consume less of what we sell. And we have to do that because, and now as if we flip back today we're going to go through this transition. We have this plan. We're going to electrify a whole section of the economy. Transportation is one of them. We're going to have a fossil-driven consumption coming to electricity. But you know what? If too much comes, then we will have to build. And if we build, it will be more costly. And if it's more costly, electricity will be less attractive. So we have to make room by our own consumption and behavior. We have to make room to the new demand that is coming from the fossil fuel. And it goes back to what I was saying. We need to reduce the emissions, but we need to do it at the least cost possible. So if my business model was driven on more and more and more volumes and demand and feeding and getting big, we would lose sight of the actual goal, which is reducing GHG at the least cost possible. So my own experience is that we've lost touch among ourselves And the big thing that happened in Canada and everywhere in the world, but in Canada, 30 years ago, people were these abonnés. How do we say abonné in English? People were, you were a utility, you were a ratepayer, whatever that means, okay? You were a ratepayer. But then the ratepayer became a client, and the client became a customer, and the customer became very educated and a citizen. And the citizen is a taxpayer and a carbon taxpayer. And everybody said, shit, and he became or she became a voter. Mm-hmm. So we as human beings became like a Russian doll. And this Russian doll needs to understand what he or she has to do for this transition, what will it cost, how I will be out, starting from our respective starting point.
Thank you for that story. That's really interesting. Earlier this month, Quebec Premier Legault announced a return to a 600 million wind power project, which he had previously canceled in 2018. What explains this sudden direction of change? He said he was against wind power before because it would cost too much to produce it.
Well, wind power in Quebec has been developed over the last decade. There was a program and projects came in within that program. The last tranche was a 200 megawatt plant. It was a 200 megawatt, and the previous administration had made it possible with the Innu community. I don't want to come back to the past. I was not there. It's not my style. It's not useful. But all this to say that at the time when Premier Legault arrived on site, said, well, the fact is we have a lot of power. We have lots of surpluses. So adding more power at a more costly price is not a good idea. But then he made a promise. He said, when we will need power, that will be the first project to move on. As I came in, I see lots of things happening. I see enthusiasm in the US Northeast. I see enthusiasm here in Quebec. The perspective of demand evolution is stronger than ever. So the time was right to make a signal to the Innu community. And to me, this is this is so beautiful, Linda, because, you know, the indigenous people history in Quebec have an intertwined history with our own trajectory at Hydro-Quebec. And sometimes it's been difficult. Sometimes it's been great. It's way better today than it was 40 years ago, and it will be better next week than it is this week, in the sense that we need to do better. This project was thought about, initiated, dreamed by the indigenous community of the Innu. And they said, we could do wind, and it was correlated to their own culture, because it does not deter the earth, it does not deter anything, and they feel that wind makes a lot of sense, you know, in their value. So they developed a project, they found themselves a partner, and they came to us, and we sat down, and actually so we need the volumes. It makes sense in our portfolio when we look at the famous future we talked about. And at the same time, the financing cost for the capital cost has decreased over the last 2 years, you know, with the interest rates have fallen. So when it trickles down to the cost of the project, it makes it very attractive. So it made sense from the demand perspective. It made sense from the cost perspective. And today, this Innu communities will be a supplier of Hydro-Quebec. Wow. To me, it's fantastic. I'm so thrilled about it.
Is that the future for Hydro-Quebec? I mean, is it the end of dams? Has the last dam been built?
Well, I cannot talk about, you know, long term. Certainly in the short, medium term, I don't see where we would need to actually build dams. The beauty of adding wind and solar, which are intermittents, as you know, and associating them with the large dam, makes us capable of developing wind and solar, but making sure that we have the backup to make sure that if it doesn't wind, like this year is not very windy in Quebec. It's really not windy. It's below normal. So if we didn't have the backup, it meant that we would have to to have all sorts of things to secure the power supply. So all this to say, the mixture of both is great. We have been blessed. We harnessed the hydropower, and today we mix it with solar and wind. And so I do believe that there will be more wind for the next little while. This is how we're going to increase the energy production in Quebec. We will do solar, that's for sure. And I cannot close forever because I don't know the future, and I will not be there anymore. I'll be dead, maybe. But I certainly say that in the short to medium term, I see that there are other means. And one of the great means, I come back to that, is energy efficiency. And actually, the numbers are important because between 2003 and 2019, the energy efficiency program in Quebec saved 10 terawatt hours of consumption, liberated, okay, freed. 10 terawatt hour is exactly the contract of Massachusetts, which it means that we are exporting our largest export contract on the basis of the efficiency that we generated. That's the cheapest energy you can get. That's the cleanest energy you can get, and it's valorized on an export market. So,
well, let's turn to hydrogen, which I know for me it's pretty hard to understand. So I'm wondering if, first of all, you can try to make that a little bit more accessible to our audience. Like, you know, there's a debate about hydrogen. There's green hydrogen. There's blue hydrogen. There's gray hydrogen. It's gaining international traction as an alternative to fossil fuels, especially in the context of the EU's net zero emissions goal for 2050. But our readers have expressed concern about the economic and environmental challenges of dams and of hydrogen production. So how do you, this is a big question, I'm asking you a massive question, but how do you, I'm asking you to tell us about where this fits in with Hydro-Quebec's plans, hydrogen, and also, like, what are the environmental impacts of it?
Okay, well, hydrogen, I will talk about what we're trying to do in Quebec, okay? Mm-hmm. In Quebec, we have hydropower, we have clean power, and we have green power. And the idea is to produce a green hydrogen. Electricity by itself cannot do everything. Electricity by itself can do some things, run motor and everything, but at one point you need a fuel, and it's been fueled by fossil fuels. Hydrogen is about creating a fuel that will be cleaner than the straight fossil fuel. So if you take a green, energy, and you make it with you make hydrogen using this green energy, and you just create a green fuel. The cost is more than natural gas. The cost is more than oil. But then you go, if there is more and more costing of the carbon, if there are goals to green the economy, at one point, and this is where we are in Quebec, at one point, if we want to go and achieve our goals, there is no way we can do that on the long run if we don't use something like hydrogen. So, because at the end of the day, there are things that electricity cannot do. It can't. So you will need the fuel. So you want to create a clean fuel with hydrogen. The beauty of hydrogen, if you push yourself into the future, you take clean hydrogen, you take CO2, you mix the two, it creates a perfectly renewable, compatible natural gas. So if you project, and I'm not saying this is easy and this is cheap, but if you project yourself in the future, you can take green power, create green hydrogen, combine it with CO2 that you've been capturing, inject it into the natural gas distribution network, and then you can say, whether you're using electricity as the first energy, or whether you need a carburant, a fuel, it will be green because you will have greened it with green electricity. It's complex. Hydrogen is not an end in itself, eh? It's a mean. It's a mean to green a demand and a supply that is today fueled by fossil fuels. It is costly, but it costs less and less. And I would say that 70% of the cost of hydrogen comes from the cost of electricity, and 30% comes from others. So the pocket of electricity cost is a big chunk. So if you can use cheap electricity with a decreasing technology cost, then you reach a zone where hydrogen makes sense. So in Quebec, we have elected to build what will be the largest electrolyzer in the world. It will be 80 megawatt, and it will fuel a recycling of waste facilities. So we're developing this because, like the rest of the world, like EU, like Germany, like France, we do believe that hydrogen in 20, 30 years from now will be absolutely necessary to achieve the cleaning goal that we collectively have. So, but this is tough, and this is not going to be easy, and there is a cost to it. That's for sure.
You are not a politician. You're a CEO. But I still have to ask you, under the Paris Agreement, I just think you might have some interesting insight about this. Under the Paris Agreement, Canada committed to reducing its greenhouse gas emissions by 30%, below the 2005 levels by 2030. This is Canada's race against climate change. Are we going to win it? Are we going to make those goals?
There is a path. There is a path. There is a need. There is a path. But I think we need to be clear about the fact that there is a cost, and that the cost cannot be shared only by the people who will be suffering from a loss. It will have to be shared by people who have a gain. It cannot be supported only by the people who would technically suffer a loss if they were left by themselves. So I think it's a real challenge. It's a real challenge, but it's doable. But the less we talk about the cost, the more the people have the impression that it's going to be okay, and it's going to be okay. But they will have to be a change in behavior, and there is a lot of take electrification, for example. We talk about greening and we talk about electrification, and electricity will do a lot, but it cannot do everything. And let's say electric transportation, for example. We put a lot of emphasis on electric buses, city buses and electric buses. In many cities, it makes plenty of sense. That's what you want. But in many cities, what you want is a public transit that makes sense, be it in diesel, that be much better than what we have right now. So the idea, again, is not to be demagogic about what we have to do. And if we can eventually electrify those buses because the population will get to a concentration that makes sense, that's fine. But so it's about the way we're going to work the territory. It's about the way that we're going to do public transit. My personal belief is that public transit is so important. And here in Quebec, we have a lot of work to do on that.
Things that are key. I'm sorry, go ahead. Things that are possible.
It's just impossible. If you live on the south shore of Montreal, you have 2 kids, you need to do the hockey and do the grocery. Forget about it. Public transit won't make it happen. It's not possible. So we need public transit that makes sense. Be it in diesel, that would be a huge improvement over cars.
Sophie, my last question, and then I'm going to turn to some questions that have come up in the chat and from subscribers. My last question to you is just if you could comment on, how can Canada reach its climate targets? Canada's, the federal government expresses a lot of commitment to that. There's a lot of excitement around that, a lot of great projects. However, there's also a commitment by the federal government to, get through a number of pipelines. So how do you reconcile that? What do you think about that? Is that realistic? Can you have, high aspirations for reducing greenhouse gas while also developing new gas and oil pipelines?
Well, you know, as you said, I am not a politician, and the environmental trajectory and path is not going to be about is not going to be about an arithmetic things. And I would say the following: if we Canadians believe that oil productions should start tomorrow, should stop tomorrow. Let's say it stop tomorrow. Okay, we want to be clean, stop tomorrow, fine. No pipelines, fine. Who is going to pay for that? If we as Canadians are fine and happy of paying $1,000 more per year of our personal tax to go there, would you, Linda? Would everybody else does? I mean, that's it. It's at the end of the day, it's not the issue of Alberta, it's the issue of Canada. And so to the extent, I would tell you something a little bit weird, but to the extent that Canadians would be willing individually to reduce their own oil consumption at the rhythm that they're asking Alberta to reduce their production, that'd be a nice conversation, but that's not happening. We are increasing oil use. We are, individually. So there is a little bit of sarcasm there, because we act differently on our personal behavior than we're asking a country to react, or a province to react with its own destiny. To me,
how do we stop? How do we stop as individuals? That's an excellent point. But
so the idea is probably a 30 years transition. Mm-hmm. And the idea is maybe to say an idea like that. I'm just saying it's brain. I'm throwing an idea. It's to say, mm-hmm. Okay, they are discovered reserves today, discovered and let's say connected, and capital has been invested, and people have invested their life into that. Okay, what is the life duration of those reserves? Let's say it's 30 years. Mm-hmm. We could think, okay, you should produce the oil that you have invested in. You have invested your capital, you should produce it. It might not be the greatest idea to keep exploring for more. So if you produce it, we will find a way, be it domestic, be it whatever, to have you get the best price for what you have connected. We're going to give you a hand because you want to have the best value for that. And over that 30 or 35 years of life duration that you're going to decline production, during those 35 years, we as Canadians are going to help your economy to diversify yourself. So it's a 35 years pact that we need to do collectively. And then we can say that we're all putting our shoulder to the big wheel. So it's very delicate, and it's not about building a pipe or not building a pipe. It's what are the goals? Who get to pay over which period of time? It's 35 years. That to me, it's
Sophie,
35 years.
You have repeated that phrase. I think you've said who gets to pay, who will pay. And, you've raised the issue of consumers raising their use of oil, not decreasing it, even despite those polling figures that I quoted to you, which said that, Canadians are very much behind. 70% want the government, believe that we need to do something about climate change. So you've raised the question of who is going to pay for it. So I want to put that back to you. Who should pay for it?
Everybody will. Because if the government pays for it, our children will pay for it in their taxes. If we put it in the tariff, it's everybody who's getting. So everybody is called upon like a big challenge and dream and necessity. And we cannot say, oh, it's not me, I won't pay for that. It's the government, it's Alberta, it's the industries, it's the rich. Everybody will pay. It's not dramatic that everybody will pay. It's just that we will have to pay for it, and it will take 35 years. And if we embrace it intelligently and we think it through, and we send the right signals for the people to adopt the right behavior, then it will be less impactful cost-wise. The more we wait, the more it's going to cost. That's just reality. I'll give you the example of Montreal. Maybe it's the end of it. I'll give you a very precise example. Montreal. We say we need to electrify public transit. Super. We're electrifying. Can we take it at Hydro-Quebec? Yes. Are we making it? Okay. Do we have public transit buses manufactured? Yes. The government will say, I will ask school buses to be electrified, and electricity buses to be electrified. Good. Do we have subsidies? Yes. And then we'll go, and then we say, okay, we need to recharge those buses. Okay, we need batteries. Fine. What will be the business model? And then the business model says, either you recharge as you go, either you recharge in the garage. Let's do it in the garage. Makes more sense during the night. Oh, fine. You know what? We got to change the garage. We got to change the garage. It cost a lot of money. So, okay, now we have to change the garage. Okay, fine. Who's going to pay for the garage? The government. And if we pay for the garage in Montreal and it's the government who pay, what does that mean? It means that the gal in Gaspésie is paying for an electric public transit garage in Montreal. That's what it means. At the end of the day, this is what it means. So it's a collective. We're all in the same bath. We share the same water.
I have one more question. I've promised to get a subscriber question in, and we're running out of time. So I'm going to ask you to try to answer this in one sentence. I know it's hard. So if you think about the next 35 years, and if we all have to pay, as individuals, you're an economist, like, have you thought about this? How much does each of us have to pay? How much does, okay.
But I think there are two costs. There is a change of behavior, a change of lifestyle, for sure. And there is a cost of money. And I have not done that work through. I am sure there are brilliant people within our respective governments who are doing just that calculation. And
I'm going to look for that, because you've really got that in my head now. We have to pay. We're going to have to pay. Now, I have one question for you, that if we're going to squeeze in a question from Dave Carson, who asks, it's a great question, what are the obstacles for selling Quebec power to Ontario, and how can we overcome them?
Well, there is no obstacle. The lines are there. They're almost not used. And here it comes from the starting point. Ontario has nuclear. With nuclear comes jobs and workers. And we can certainly sell cheap, clean power to Ontario, but that would mean putting people in Ontario in a different spot. And the Premier of Ontario has said, well, my workers are important. So this is it. It comes back to what I'm saying. There is a cost. So there is a cost. And the cost is human, and it comes back to somebody. So people say it's politic. No, it's not political. It's human beings. Human beings create the politicals. So your example is so perfect. I mean, the lines are there. We could flow it, and we sometimes do. When they need us, we go. So we go. We understand. You have your own energy policy. You have nuclear, and you have your people and your workers. So if you have an issue, you're late, we can sell you power if and when. That's it. I'm not going to impose on the Premier of Ontario that he should get a clean energy power cheapest. Now, if you talk to some Ontario, they tell me, why can't you sell us, and it would be cheaper and everything? There is a cost. Somebody has to pay.
This has been such an interesting conversation. Yeah. I cannot thank you enough. It's really, really been so great to have you here and to meet you and to talk with you. And I've not paid a lot of attention to the chat, but I can see enough going on that all I can tell you is you have stimulated a great deal of conversation, a lot of questions we will pass on to you, and you and your staff might want to take a look at them. Really interesting conversation that went on. And I want to thank all of you who are on the call, and thank you again, Sophie. I hope you'll all come back. We have next up is Bill McKibben. And then after Bill, we've got the European Union talking to us about their climate plans for the next few years. And then our next guest will be Julian Brave Noisecat, talking to us about grassroots organizing. His organization was responsible in large part for the nomination of the first of the Indigenous woman who is up for Interior Secretary Minister in the United States. So that's the 3 amazing talks ahead. And Sophie, this one was so interesting. So thank you, everybody. Check out National Observer.
Thank you. And I'm sorry that my English is not good. It's difficult for me to make the nuances that your questions deserve. I'm sorry for that if I was not able to complete my thoughts. Anyway, be safe.
Your everyone. English was excellent.
I love my experience. Thank you very much. Peace.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.